Greetings, Internet. My name is Chris. This is my definitive guide to tanking. First off, let's start with the basics. So as a tank, you have the choice to go 4 different routes, at least the way I see it. You have the way of stacking stamina or magicka. Either one is good, has its pros and cons, I suppose. If you have a lot of stamina, it obviously makes it a lot easier, since they in update 7 reduced or removed entirely actually the stamina regen when you're blocking. Stacking magic helps though, since a lot of your class abilities don't have stamina morphs, like stacking magic I mean, because a lot of the abilities don't have stamina morphs but only magicka. And in certain cases, at least I've found, I prefer stacking magicka because Inner Fire, for example, your undaunted range taunt, it's good to have that as magicka and then have your puncture as your stamina taunt to even out the resource usage. There's also, this is an older way of tanking. I don't know if it's effective anymore, but you could stack health. This is something I used to do before update 6, because update 6 made pretty much that useless, since the range taunt cost over twice as much as it did before. And then there's I think this was mostly before update 7, the neutral setup, where pretty much all your stats are equal, but this is mostly something I've seen in PvP tanking, you know, where you're perma blocking and still doing a lot of damage. I think I watched a video of Cody having such a setup, but I don't know the viability of this in PvE because I haven't actually tried it. I don't know if it would be that good in PvE. For the gear, there's a few archetypes, or a few stereotypical combos. The most normal one I've seen is Footman, Hisbark, and then a 2-piece Undaunted set. Usually people would use Bloodspawn or Engine Guardian. I think more people are using Engine Guardian now because of the removal of stamina regen when you're blocking. But I still use Bloodspawn because I'm a Dragonite tank mainly, and I think Bloodspawn is a lot better because as a Dragonite you have a passive that gives you back resources when you use an ultimate. So it's better to have the Bloodspawn that gives you ultimate when you take damage, which is kind of nice. The setup I'm running on my tank is not using Hisbark, because I prefer using Seducer. You could also use Magnus's Gift or Twilight's Embrace, Yokeda. That sort of stuff. The reason why I don't use Engine Guardian either is because it makes you very reliant on it. I'm using it on my PvP Nightblade, and sometimes I just notice myself running out of resources because I expect a certain kind of what do you call it? A certain kind of the Dwemer spheres to pop up and give me the exact resource I need, which is not something you want to do. You want to be able to maintain your resources without running completely out of them, because you don't get the proc you want. And that's why I also prefer Bloodspawn as the 2-piece. I think in certain cases Bloodspawn is probably not the best, but I was also using it on my Nightblade and my Sorcerer pretty effectively, so that should tell you something. Just because everyone is running a certain setup doesn't mean it will actually fit for you, so you could pick whatever kind of setup you want, and if it works, it works. Tanking is very unlike any other role in the game. You can be a good tank without having a setup that necessarily sounds good to theory crafters. Resource management is very, very important. That's another one of the basics. Actually, it's a little bit more in the advanced, but I've kept it in the basics, I guess. In the category here, resource management is what will differentiate you between a good and a bad tank. At least it's one of the things that will. Resource management is all about keeping your stamina and your magicka above 0, because if they're at 0, you're doing something wrong. Um, it's about having a sort of skill rotation. Like, say if you're a buff tank, you have a lot of skills to go through to get your tanking on, I suppose. And that will be a very costly rotation that you'll have to repeat like every 20 seconds or so. So you kind of want to keep that in your mind. Like, do I want to be a buff tank? Do I want to have 4 or 5 buffs to go through, or or whatever? I usually just use the shuffle buff. That's from the medium armor skill tree. It's the morph of evasion, because I kind of like the dodge chance, and since I'm not using his spark, and it's the same buff, it kind of fits. I also run shield play enchants because I only have about 16k stamina on my DK. So shield play enchants reduce the cost of blocking, also the cost of bashing if you really want to bash a lot. So, but yeah, it reduces the cost of blocking, which is really nice to have. But mainly with the resource management, make sure you're able to taunt first and foremost, because you're a tank above anything else. You're supposed to just taunt stuff. Your healer is supposed to keep you alive. You're not supposed to have an incredibly complex taunt rotation and everything. It's supposed to be as simple as possible, otherwise it's just going to be really hard for you. And then for your bar setup, you need to make sure that your skills and morphs make sense. Like, don't make stupid choices. Don't go, oh, I'd rather want the stamina morph of this, even though all my resource is based in magicka. You know, it has to make sense in that sense. I like to keep both my taunts in the same bar because it makes it less confusing for me, and then have my off bar be sort of like a buff bar. I have carve on my off bar, which means I'm using a two-hander, because carve is really nice for ultimate regen. But this is something that you wanna like, you wanna like maybe sit down, give this a proper revision before you start using it. You know, like, make sure you only have the things you need on your bar. Pick the things you need the most. Like, have your 2 taunts. You should always have 2 taunts, just in case you run out of one resource. You can swap to the other one. If you have both taunts based in the same resource, that might be a little bit hard for you. Even my stamina based DK tank friend Echo runs with Magicka morph of Inner Fire, for example. For your main and second bar, you wanna. I think it's usually a good idea to split these up. My main bar is always my tank bar. This bar only has the skills that is good for tanking, like Absorb Magic. I really like that one. It has both my taunts. It has Structured Entropy, and then it has my Dragon Blood. If you're not a Dragon Knight, it would have some other skill. A Sorcerer probably would have Hardened Ward instead of Dragon Blood. Nightblade would probably have Swallow Soul for the extra healing taken. You know, that sort of stuff. Your secondary bar could be many things. It could be a damage dealer bar, though I don't recommend this because this is a really good way to ruin your resource management. It could also be a healer bar. I kind of recommend this if you're doing a Nightblade or a Sorcerer tank, because having a secondary heal bar is good since you don't really have all the many self-heal possibilities. Although the Sorcerer does have Clan Fear self-heal now, which is kind of good. The Nightblade I don't think has that much going for it. At least I've never been able to use the class abilities to much effect. And I like keeping these bars separate. I know some people will spread out their taunts. They'll have one taunt on one bar, and one taunt on the other bar. This just makes it confusing for me if I have to keep swapping. Plus, if you're tanking, limit your bar swapping as much as possible, because you need to keep in mind when you swap your bar, you let go of block for about 2 seconds. And when you let go of block, that is the optimal time for a boss to hit you in the face with his strongest attack and kill you immediately. I have died this way so many times. I've seen so many other people die this way so many times. Just make sure you don't swap your bars unless you really need to. So have all your tanking skills on one bar, have all your auxiliary skills on the other bar, that sort of stuff. Also keep in mind, you are a tank first and foremost. Tanking is not about doing damage, it's not about healing, it's not about buffing up the entire group, it's about tanking and taunting all the NPCs and making sure you're the only guy getting hit. Now lastly, we have the taunt rotation. This is very complex, and there are certainly many different ways to do it. First off, there are a few different techniques you could use for tanking. You could start off the engagement with a group of NPCs by throwing in an AoE on them. I like to maybe use Cinderstorm sometimes. You could also use Steel Tornado. I've seen this done. Banner, Caltrops. I don't know how effective Caltrops is anymore. On my sorcerer, I would use Negate, for example, because this is a really long crowd control that most NPCs won't break free from. And then just I would run around taunting them after doing that. Something I also like to do is just like precision spam my inner fire, because it's my range taunt. And I've gotten really good at that. I can pick up the entire group pretty much before any of them reach us. So yeah. For the taunt rotation, it is extremely hard to get used to. It takes a while. It definitely is the steepest learning curve of anything you'll face in the game. So taunt rotation is essentially how long do you wait to re-taunt a target? You know, like either have an internal timer in your head or have an add-on that does the timing for you. And it's I mean, it is very hard. The hardest thing is definitely taunting multiple things. Like if you have 3 or 4 axes in the mage fight in the Ethereal Archive. I know a lot of people have troubles taunting this specific thing because it is very hard because the axes have really unusual what do you call it? Collision boxes. What do you call that? Well, they have really unusual hitboxes. Hitboxes, that's the word, right? Which makes it very annoying to taunt them. But also just stuff like being able to hold taunt on 8 enemies, so your group can focus on killing them. That's really good. I've said this multiple times, and I'll say it again. Going into Dragonstar Arena and just doing that over and over as a tank is really, really good practice. That's how I got good at taunting groups, for example, because there will be so many enemies, and if you have the opportunity, run with a group that doesn't kill everything as soon as it appears, because that makes it harder, and that means you need to be more skillful as a tank. And lastly, one of the most important things, regardless of class, is knowing how to keep yourself alive. I've already showed you a clip of me almost soloing the last 12% of the last boss fight on veteran Dragonstar Arena. But it's also stuff like if your healer goes down, or if your healer is just really bad in like a pledge, for example, you need to know how to keep yourself alive, how to avoid from wiping the entire time. And that is something that will take a lot of practice, especially with the classes that don't really have a, what do you say, like a quite obvious self heal. Like Templars, for example, like they have a fucking whole skill tree that's just full of heals. That's really obvious, of course. Dragon Knights also, they have the Dragon Blood. It's arguably one of the best heals, I think, even though it's very expensive. But like if you're Nightblade, if you're Sorcerer, like what do you do? Do you use a healing staff? Do you use your class abilities with not so obvious self heal capabilities? Like for example, on the Sorcerer, I use the Clan Fear to some effect in certain cases, but like it doesn't work all the time, and a self heal like the Clan Fear self heal is not good in most situations. It requires you like to like let down your guard, like because you can't block while you're casting, for example. So it would require you to outrange the boss, um, for example, and so it doesn't work in all fights. Um, One thing I will say about the taunt rotation is that they've changed it in update 7, so you can no longer over taunt a target unless you're two tanks taunting it. Meaning that taunt rotation is actually a lot easier. You basically you can spam your taunt on a target and it will never get over taunted. It's only if two people taunt a target 3 times within 10 seconds. I think it's a shame they took this over taunting feature away because I actually kind of liked it. It made it a lot harder, more skillful, I suppose. But in the overall state of the game, it's good to not have over taunting, especially since more tanks will focus on keeping their stamina up more than like you're timing their taunts. So this does give you some what do you say, like it doesn't make it as difficult to learn how to taunt groups or learn how to just taunt one target because you can just keep taunting every 5 seconds if you have the resources for it, which I guess it's all right, but I did kind of like the over taunting feature, especially because I was good at it. um, but I mean that's how it is, I suppose. I will say the zero stam regen when blocking is pretty silly, and for two reasons you probably wouldn't expect. First off, it makes non-Templar healers really ineffective, because as far as I can tell, only the Templars have abilities that restore stamina to other people. They have repentance and they have the shards. Other classes have abilities to restore stamina, like the Dragon Knight has the what's it called? Well, they have one passive that when you use any abilities from that skill line, it gives you 5% stamina back, which is kind of good if you have a lot of stamina. And the Nightblade has the siphoning strikes, for example, which I think is really good now because it's no longer a toggle; it's just a cast. Which when you use that, all your damage abilities have a chance to return match against stamina, and your light and heavy attacks return match against stamina as well. So that's pretty good. And the other thing is that stamina regen passives and stamina regen enchants and what do you call it? And the like the set piece effects. They're just all really bad now, which is a shame. Anyway, I think I covered pretty much everything I wanted to cover about this. Um, there's no specific way you can actually learn taunt rotation and learning how to taunt groups without just trying. Like it's not like, oh, these simple tricks will make you a better tank. It's really just about practicing until you get better at it. It's like that with everything in life, really. Anyway, thank you